5.1 determiners, and specifically the kind of determiner that we'll talk about are the partitive articles. It is a type of determiner. So determiners, the partitive articles, are used for quantities that can't be counted. So numbers of things that we can't count. And we'll go over really what that means. Now, what do our partitive articles look like? They are du for masculine nouns, de la for feminine nouns, and then de, L apostrophe, for nouns that begin with a vowel. They could be masculine or they could be feminine. So, what are they used for? They're used for mass nouns, like chocolate. I'm just referring to all the chocolate in the world. I love chocolate. I'm not talking about a specific thing, and it's just a mass noun there. Also, things that are indivisible or uncountable, like water or milk. We don't usually go around talking about water in terms of ounces. We just are referring to the whole. We just would like some water. Now that brings us to a specific word here, the word some. In English, sometimes we'll use the word some, like some water, I need some milk, and sometimes we leave it out. So we won't have a partitive article in English, but we need to have it in French. So an example would be you're writing a grocery list and you want your friend your roommate to buy cheese and flour and milk. And you're not saying 2 milks or 3 milks, you're just putting milk on the list. You're not saying 1 flour or 2 flour. I'm talking about the flour they use for baking, not a flour that grows in the grass, okay? So they're not countable. We can put in English, we need some milk, we need some flour too, but we can just as well leave it out. So here, those are our examples. Those are the general ways that we use them. Now don't confuse the partitive articles with our definite articles. Remember, definite articles were le, la, les, and L apostrophe. These definite ones would refer to the whole. So partitive articles referring to part of a whole. Definite articles are referring to the whole. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about part of it. If we're talking about part of the whole, then we switch to this. But if we're just talking about the whole, we're going to use our definite articles. And then we also have our indefinite articles. Un, une, des. And don't confuse the indefinite articles with our partitive. These, like for des, for example, we can translate this to some in English, but here it's some of a countable object. So we could say un toy, un jouet, or we could say des jouets. We're saying some toys. But it's not the same thing as using it for here. Toys are countable. We just didn't happen to count it at that time. We're just saying some toys. But we could say 1 toy, we could say 2 toys. So you can't, many things, if they're countable here, then you're not going to use the partitive article for it because it's countable. And we said partitive articles are for quantities that can't be counted, and at the same time, they are for part of the whole of something that can't be counted. So let's look at an example. It's going to be a little tricky because it's going to fall into all the categories, and most of the words, like I just said, wouldn't fall into all the categories. If they fell into here, they wouldn't be included in a partitive. So let's look at an example. We would say du café. Okay, what do we have what can we get at lunch? Like, what can we buy to drink? Well, we have some coffee. It's part of a whole, and we're not counting it. We're just saying that coffee is available and that some coffee. We're not referring to the whole of coffee. Now, if we were saying, well, I'm so glad that there's coffee available because I love coffee. Now we're referring to the whole. for coffee specifically, the same word, café, can refer to the whole, or you can use coffee as just a coffee. You're leaving out the mug of coffee or the cup of coffee. And in English, we do that too. Coffee is generally uncountable, but it's just really because we're leaving out the word a cup of coffee. We can just say, I'd like a coffee, please, or 2 coffees, please. So we can say, un café. Now, let's go to an example that doesn't really work for this and shows you the true nature of partitive articles. So we would say, well, what do you want with your coffee? There is du lait. There's some milk. We're not referring to milk as a whole. Now, if you said, okay, there's du lait available to put in your coffee, and then you could answer, oh yes, I love le lait. I love milk. Here we're referring to it as a whole. I love milk. Le lait. But you couldn't use it here. I want a milk. I want 2 milks. That wouldn't make sense. So milk is a better example of where du lait, you're saying it's a part of a whole and it can't be counted. You're just basically saying some milk. Okay, and then the thing to watch out for here is that when you're putting them in sentences, when you have this here in a sentence, it's very similar to when you would say il y a. And hopefully you already learned that phrase in French 1, where if you said il y a, you would say il y a un stylo, there is a pen. But if you were saying the opposite, the negative statement, il n'y a pas, okay, there's not, then you would follow it with de, and that's the same thing. This would all change to de. Okay? So for example, well, yeah, we could just use that. Il n'y a pas de lait. Milk. There isn't any milk in the fridge. So we would change it from du lait, il y a du lait, there is milk, and we would change that to de because we're saying ne and pas. So watch out for that. It kind of makes it easier. Now, you're going to see, and you might have this connection. Well, I thought du was de and le equals du. This is a type of contraction, and it pretty much looks the same exact. It looks identical to the partitive article. This is not the partitive article. Okay, this is our contraction. So what would be a good example here? From the office. If you were saying, I'm coming from the office, we would say de le bureau, and that would change to du bureau. This is not a partitive article, but it really doesn't matter because you know when to use this and you know when to use this. It doesn't matter that they look the same. It shouldn't really be confusing. If you see this and you know what this means, it can sometimes mean from the, and if you translate this in your mind as of the, like there isn't any of milk or of the milk, that's fine. It's not going to interfere with your French writing. The fact that this looks the same as that. I'm not going to quiz you and say, oh, du bureau, quick, is that a partitive article or is that just a contraction? You don't have to know that. You just have to know when to use these.